Hello and welcome to another episode of The Legal Unicorns. This is, for those of you who've never listened before, this is the podcast where we interview young and sometimes not so young African talent in the legal space, wherever they may be based in the world, and that have taken their career in a different direction or have taken chances, or they're people that we can learn from. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Oliver Kabongo, who was originally born in the DRC, was raised in South Africa, and is now living in my hometown of London. So we've done a swap. And Oliver joins us from Holland Park today. So thank you first and foremost, Oliver, for joining us today.
No, thank you very much, Rob, for having me.
Brilliant. Well, look, I think, there's a lot to get through. I've looked at your career and I've been very, very keen to get you on. And what I wasn't aware of until I knew that we'd locked this in, and I flew up to Joburg to sit in the studio, was that this London move's a recent thing, right? I thought you were in Australia you were there for quite a while, right?
Yes. So maybe just background. So born in Congo, grew up in South Africa, studied in South Africa, started my legal career in South Africa, made the bold move in 2015 to move to the unknown, Sydney, Australia, where, spent the last 7 years there with my wife and, a little 5-year-old now. It was a great 7-year period, and, there was, COVID hit, which went was in Australia for much longer than probably envisaged to be, and the opportunity came up to do a transfer across with my firm to the London office, and it's been a year now, so we've had our first winter in London, which actually wasn't too bad at all, so not as bad as people made it out to be, touch wood, but yes, it's been a good year so far in London.
Brilliant. Well, look, I mean, on a technical side of things, just so you know, if you've, I know some of our guests haven't used this platform before, but if I, and we can leave this is no problem. If I freeze, or if you freeze or anything, please just carry on talking, because behind it, it's still working and it's still recording. But anyway, that's just a technical thing because I just saw myself freeze. But but anyway, look, okay, so let's get to you and to your journey really, really quickly. So, like you just mentioned there, and I mentioned before, born in, you're Congolese, you were born in the DRC. And when did you move to South Africa?
So my parents moved in the early 90s, so 92, 93 period. So my dad actually, he moved before us, so he did his master's at Wits University. He's an architect, so he did that he did his master's in urban designing, and the natural move then was obviously for the family to follow. So we all made the move in 92, and pretty much lived in South Africa until the move to Australia.
So you were a little kid then, were you? Just
yeah, I mean, I could give my age away here, but I was 2 years old, so it's very easy to do the maths. Cool.
Yeah, I've done it. That's good. So it's a bit fresh start for the family. I mean, Wits is a university I know pretty well. I was on campus there talking to the African Law Students Association last year, which was a wonderful experience for me, actually. There was students from, I think, 35, maybe 40 countries. So it was quite a wonderful institution there. But so you're growing up in South Africa, and you start. I mean, I'm guessing you're living in Joburg all that time, are you?
Yes, Joburg the whole time.
Yeah.
Before studying Joburg bred.
Before, born and bred. Well, not born, but bred. Brought up in Joburg, going to the University of the Wits University, obviously University of Witwatersrand, and to do the law. So, was there any reason behind your decision to go into the law? Is there? I mean, you say your father's an architect. Is there anything that really drew you in?
It's quite funny enough. So, end of high school, when you at the point in your pretty much the most pivotal point in your life, right, where you've got to decide what are you going to be studying, right? My dad was very keen for me, to get into architecture as well. And I just wasn't the artsy person, I was more actually into business, really loved business, pretty entrepreneurial. So I actually enrolled at Wits for a BCom degree.
Mm.
And, you kind of sign up and, you tell your parents that you've enrolled for, and they were just, being a very, migrant family, hard work, stay out of trouble, they were just like, oh, a 3-year degree, are you going to really be employable with just that? And my older sister at the time, she was actually studying just a straight LLB. And I was like,
Yeah.
why not? I'll just tack on the double major. So I ended up then adding on the law degree to my BCom. So then eventually majored in marketing and law in the end. So to be honest, no true inspiration. There was no movie or role model that said, do law. And maybe in hindsight, I could say, inspiration could have been my sister, and she obviously played a key role there where she was studying to become a lawyer. And I was like, hey, why not? Seems to be an easy path. I can just get her notes, to study and, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would have thought as
Yeah.
well. I'd be like, well, she's doing it. I can just carry
Yeah.
her notes. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly that.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, like you say, yeah. I mean, I think the guests we've had on, it's always a question I like to ask, just to get an understanding of them and what was sort of driving them to head into that pathway of the law. And yeah, quite often it's a father or who was a lawyer before, and then more so, and very recently, in fact, the people who've watched a movie or they've watched a TV show, and
Yeah.
and it's like, I want to do that, and I'm sure in 10 years' time that we'll have other guests on who will say Suits and things like that, So yeah, but you've got the family element, you've got the sisters there at the university as well, and then fantastic university as we've said as well, and then you're there and you graduate a few years ago, and then there's always difficulty in South Africa of getting articles. Did you? I mean, did you go the? Did you get it? Did you secure your articles early on? Because you were at Bowman's, right? Which is obviously one of as those listening, is one of the top firms in South Africa. Did you get that early, or was it? Did you have to apply to lots of places, or how did it work?
No, it was a true struggle, right? And as you've just kind of alluded to the fact, South Africa is being a very young country, with all the its historic issues. It was hard. So regardless of I really got top marks during my law degree, but I did find it pretty humbling. It was a true struggle, finding my articles, and it was purely because of the fact that not being a South African, it was really hard. Your CV almost just gets rejected automatically as you submit it. So it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of editing of the CV, a lot of PRing, going to career days at the campuses. So most people, the top firms usually do hire lawyers for their training contracts in their second year, of the university. I mean, I was not the case at all. I pretty much essentially secured my articles the last 6 months of my university career. And then, thankfully, Bowman looked past, all the I guess paperwork and being a true African firm, and that was my selling pitch at the interview was like, look, you're a leading African law firm, you need to be hiring African lawyers as well, and that just doesn't mean South Africans only, just broader African. And I guess that was a selling pitch. So I secured my
And then
articles at Bowman.
And then when you're in there, then you've got to work really, really hard to stick around and to progress. And obviously, I guess you're clearly showing us already that you have a hardworking nature as well. So I'm guessing that did you do on that note? Just because obviously we often get asked this. Did you do rotations, or did you stay in one or two areas when you were there? I know it's a while back now, but do you
No. So the standard, and I think still the same, and I know it's been the same, both in Australia and London, is part of your training program is you do 4 rotations. So it's a 2-year training contract. You do 4 rotations. My first one was actually, funny enough, in construction, in the construction and engineering team. Which again aligns back to, my dad always had this dream of, I'd be the architect in the family. So I did a
Look,
rotation.
Dad, I'm sort of doing it.
You're somewhat doing it, right? So there was construction, there was banking and finance, litigation, and corporate M&A, which was my third rotation, and that's where I really felt the love of M&A, and it really aligned with my goals of there being entrepreneurial, and I felt that was the most aligned career path I could see myself doing for a long time. And after your 4 rotations, you somewhat get to pick, or you give your preference of where you want to go, and it's a bit of an interview process, right, where the teams you apply for have to obviously decide, who are they keeping on, is there capacity to take you on or not. And I landed up in the corporate M&A team at Bowman's as an associate.
Yeah, which, for those who are listening and not sure of that, is one of the best M&A teams in the country, and that, you get the chance to work on fantastic deals with superb lawyers that you can really, and deal makers, people who are really at the cutting edge of those deals, and you can learn from them. I assume, certainly a good training, good grounding. We were actually just saying yesterday, I was at a client meeting and we were discussing how well trained Bowman's lawyers are. I wasn't at Bowman's talking about how good they are. We were at a competing firm, but just saying how good the training program is, how good the lawyers are. And then you get into that M&A team, and you've got the opportunity to work on those market leading deals, and cross-border, I guess, as well, would have been your first introduction into that space.
Yes, yeah, that's probably the first time, you kind of understand term of what cross-border means, right? And it's essentially, for the layman term, it's really doing a transaction. So you might be a lawyer based in South Africa, but you're actually doing a transaction where you're advising, a Kenyan shareholder who's might be selling their shares in a Nigerian business, and the acquirer might be based in London, right? So it's pretty much you're literally crossing the borders and advising across different borders, different legal sectors, and you're interacting with different lawyers who are trained from different countries.
Yeah, which is it's an area that a lot of people want to get into, can't get into. But once you're in it, I'm getting the impression of someone, who very much like myself, who enjoys that cutting edge deals, that international flavor, that being at that front, structuring that deal. It's the exciting part, isn't it? My first job out of university was in an M&A team, and I've kept that mentality ever since. It's so exciting to me. And also, as we know, the corporate world, that M&A world, is really, I often describe it to some of our team members, that it's, if you draw a spider diagram, of the law and the law firms that we work with, their corporate M&A team is really the body in the middle, and everything else spins off of that. No, this is again, great message to send to lots of people who are listening to this, and we get listeners are a vast array of different levels of their career, but for some of the younger, those law students and those looking for articles, not many people have had it easy, and Oliver is another one who had to, really, probably work harder for that job than maybe others in the future. You had to really slog it out and go to all of those career days and change your CV 50 times and put different messages, and it is hard. So it's good and thank you for sharing that with us. Now, you're a couple of years at Bowman's. I do have it up here. Yes, you had. Yeah, so you've done the articles. You're working. It's getting towards the 2016, 2017 space, and this is where the big move starts to shape. But in terms of you, just before we get into that, one of the things that we do, and then some of the listeners will know this, is that before we go on, jump on an interview with with someone like yourself. We send them a bunch of questions, really just to get you thinking about yourself and thinking about some of the things you've done. Now, one of the questions in that is asking you about a couple of specific decisions that you've made in your career to date that have really shaped your career, and very, very interesting responses. I don't know if you have them up there in front of you, but I do. But one of them was you about making the conscious decision to only work on international law for international recognized law firms. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? How did that come
Yeah,
about?
sure. I maybe not to sound snobbish or anything, right? There's definitely nothing wrong at all with being a lawyer who wants to aspire to work on domestic, transactions, or just not also do M&A, right? So it's not M&A is not the end all and be all, right?
Yeah, of course.
Of being
This
a lawyer,
is you.
but I
This
mean,
is your journey.
yeah. So in terms of my journey, I've always loved traveling. I've always thought myself, again, coming from Congo, living in South Africa, right? You're always a foreigner, right? It's not your home necessarily, right? So I always had the mindset of what else is out there? Let me travel. My parents did that when they migrated. So my aim was always to, at one point in my life, live in another country, right? So that aligned with saying, look, how do I make work also suit the lifestyle I want? And working on international deals meant, one, you liaising and you in contact with international people. Two, there's an opportunity for you to potentially one day move to another country, experience travel at the same time work in a different country. And that was my particular reasoning of why, I said, look, let me work for a top tier law firm, big branding. I'm all about branding. And again, remember, I've got the marketing degree, which I've majored in. So it's all about branding, right? About how do you position yourself, personal branding, career branding, everything you do is all about the impression, right? So it was, let me align that brand with the lifestyle that I want. And I was fortunate enough, to one, secure a job, a training contract with Bowman, stay on at Bowman's, which did international deals, which got me exposed out there. I enjoy traveling, and I said, why not? When the opportunity came up to move to Sydney, was to be honest, just a why not factor. What's the worst that could happen factor?
Yeah. Amazing. No, it's great. There's so much in that you've said that resonates with myself, because I also studied marketing, international marketing at university, left with that degree, and it shaped many of the businesses I've started. It's shaped, much of the advice that I've given many of the senior lawyers that I work with. There's always that element of branding and whether it's personal, whether it's company, or whatever it might be. So that really resonated with me. But also that you and I are very similar in terms of wanting to travel, wanting to test yourself abroad, wanting to start a new life in different countries and see if you can do it, but also that you get that adventurer bug, and that I've got, and I'm sure you have as well, that you want to go and see different places. There were a couple of other answers as well, but you also mentioned, if I may, marrying someone much smarter than you, which is an answer I really liked. That was a conscious decision, was it?
No, I mean it landed itself. My wife's seasoned finance, and what I do say, you need to align a partner with someone who's almost your equal, someone who's going to be pushing you right to the next limit. Someone who's questioning. Is that decision the right decision? Are you making the right decision at the right time? Someone who's constantly pushing you, and for the good, right? Not to a level where you completely start doubting yourself, but someone who's encouraging, understands also. Law is obviously a very demanding field. Long hours. Aligning with a partner who understands that life just made it that much easier, because she was actually doing the same hours as I was doing. So when we were both working, was work hard, but also then play hard on the off days.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's having someone in your life that inspires you and understands what you're doing, but drives you, but not drives you as in standing behind you cracking a whip, but actually you benefit from each other. And
you're almost moving together.
And you go. Yeah, that's nice. I've got the same with my wife. Although then there's the odd bump in the road when children come along, obviously. The delights, as you mentioned yourself, with your little one, and I've got two of my own. And bumps in the road, but lovely wonderful bumps, obviously, in terms of one's career and direction. Okay, so let's get into that the move to Australia. So you leave these fair shores and you're joining King & Wood Mallesons in Sydney. King & Wood Mallesons used to be a client of mine in Asia, so I know them well. I used to have an office in Sydney for 5 years, so I know the city very well. Vastly different to Johannesburg. Well, how did that come around, and what made you finally decide, we're going to go for it?
Yeah. So two of my friends who'd actually moved to London. So around 2014, 2015, you got a lot of banking lawyers from South Africa who moved across to London. And it was pure like, hey, you're moving to London. I mean, London's really great. Again, love to travel, want to be in Europe. I mean, back in the days, right, 10 years ago, flight from London to wherever else in Europe was, kind of 10, 20 pounds, right? And I just saw their lifestyle. They loved it. Again, London is the hub, right? It's kind of the pinnacle in your career, right? And you either going to London or to New York. Those are like the two big arenas, right? It's kind of your grand final in terms of your career as a lawyer, or pretty much in banking or M&A life, right? So I actually did look a lot in London, and fate had it be, or destined it be that London just wasn't for me at the right time, where roles were landing, or if there were firms were interested, they were like, oh, you're a bit too junior, give it a year or so. And I was using a recruiter at the time, so definitely big recommendation to anyone. If you're ever considering a move, use a recruiter because they really are there to guide you in making the right decisions. And the recruiter at the time, had just mentioned, hey, look, London's not really, timing's a bit off. You've got a year or so before you're ready for London. Have you considered Sydney? And I pretty much scoffed it off. I was like, Sydney, I mean, I've never been there before. The only thing I really knew about Sydney at the time was the Sydney Olympic Games. And pretty much kangaroos, right? Again, a big misconception, right? But I was like, why not? I'll interview. So, a few interviews were lined up, and the Sydney market was booming around the 2015 period, where again, because they were losing a lot of Australian lawyers to your London, to your New York, they fill that gap in with more of your Commonwealth countries. So, your South Africans, your Canadians, your Irish, a lot of them are moving or being hired in the Sydney market. So interviewed 3 firms, got 2 offers, and made a decision to join King & Wood Mallesons. Again, branding, right? It's King & Wood Mallesons, one of the largest, for firms globally, top revenue. Again, doing top transactions in Sydney. They are just massive, right? They are top 2 law firms there. So I made the moved across with them. Funny enough, the plan was to do 2 years. Was the plan? So I moved with my girlfriend at the time, my fiance at the time, who's now my wife. It was like we're doing a 2-year stint in Sydney. We've got no idea what this is going to be, how it's going to be. But the worst thing is we've got the cushion of moving back to South Africa. Or worst case, in 2 years' time, this is a big springboard into London. Got to Sydney. Loved it. I mean, you have your days, right? You've moved to a new country, no family. You've got to make new friends, which is very testing when you're much more older, right? And trying to push a career at the same time. But met amazing people along the way. And what ended up being a 2-year project actually ended up being a 7-year journey in the end.
Yeah. No, I again, there's so many things that you've just said in there that are. That resonate with myself and my wife. We had a fairly similar journey to you and yours. It's Sydney you'd never seen before. We spent a decade in Hong Kong and we'd never been there before we decided to move. And then you don't know anyone. It's a big place and you've got to make it work and you've got to get out there and you've got to work hard and you've got to play hard as well because you've got to get out and meet people and find new friends. And it's like, it's like university again, but for adults with money this time. I can see there, and I can picture Sydney in my head because, as I said, I've been there so many times. It's a big city, but it's a small city in terms of the actual city itself. But you landed at a good place. I mean, even before the merger, Mallesons was one of the top firms in that region, and then they obviously merged with King & Wood, who were a big Chinese firm, and they just went. They were a big client of ours in Asia, so I worked with them a lot. Fantastic lawyers doing top deals. So good place for you to start. And yeah, you say it turned into a 7-year journey, but obviously. Well, after you left I'm showing my age there. I can still call them Mallisons. After you left them, you did a short stint at Cause Chambers Westgarth, which is less international, but still a very good firm, right?
Yep. It's a national firm, but doing top tier work. I was there for just over a year, but it was a long year. It was a lot of transactions. It was just clockwork, a lot of hours. Still really doing international work as well. But then the opportunity came up with Norton Rose for a senior associate position. I made the move. It was a natural move, one again to realign back with that international law firm, international branding. Again, Norton Rose is huge in the US, huge in London, right? Pretty much globally as well, right? They're just When you think law firms, you are thinking, Norton Rose is out there from a brand perspective, and the opportunity came up, and pretty much been at Norton Rose now for coming up to 5 years in June actually.
Yeah, I can see from your LinkedIn profile, you started there, and then a year later, the world went into meltdown, and we all got locked away, which I hope in my lifetime never happens again, and I'm sure you do too. But I know that obviously Australia took it pretty hard. I mean, I know there were from a lockdown perspective, there was. They were pretty harsh, right? I mean, maybe not so much, I don't know, in the Sydney area, but certainly in Melbourne and that state, Victoria, I think it is, isn't it?
Yes, Victoria.
There was pretty harsh, but I'm sure, like most, you were, taking every day as it comes, obviously, and sort of trying to navigate your career, your life, as we all were in different countries, but. You also mention in your notes that you think COVID was one of a real big notable moment in shaping the future of law as it's going ahead. Is that something you agree with?
Definitely. Look, I mean, COVID obviously, brought lots of death, lots of, pain for lots of families around the world. But, when we look at I try to see life both with the positive and the negatives, right? When you look at the positives to that, for my personal journey, I made some really good friends during the lockdown period, actually. Again, because Australia had such strict laws where, you were confined to the 5-kilometer radius within your household, that you couldn't leave the 5-kilometer radius, we got to meet some really good friends who lived in the area, nearby areas, really good friends now still. Now we all, have kids, and all our kids are, friends as well now. But from a work perspective, what COVID really did is it forced a lot of law firms who are using a lot of archaic technology to actually up the game from a technology point of view. It was work from home, was a thing. I remember the one, it was pretty much a Thursday when the office. On the Friday it was, hey guys, no one's allowed into the office, and that became a 3-year period, right? Where
madness.
It just brought a bit more flexibility in terms of work, right? We all of a sudden, you didn't have to commute, the 30 minutes or an hour for a client meeting. You could just take it from your laptop in the comfort of your home. At the same time, your spouse is there. You're spending more time with your family. It just brought more of a sense of responsibility as well, especially as being a junior lawyer at the time, right? It's you're not in the confine of an office. No one's watching you, so it's, are you going to be the person who's going to still continue working hard or not? I've just chose to work hard to show that, look, I'm not in the office, but I'm still working, put in the extra hours. I probably worked longer hours actually during COVID, because again, during COVID, what it meant was it became really hard to separate work and home life, right? So all of a sudden it's 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. and it's, I could actually respond to that email because my laptop's open anyways, and it's just right there, on the dining table. We all had the classic computer setup, on the ironing board on the dining table, right? So on my journey, I felt that it has brought that flexibility for me. It's, I think, also more importantly, just from an economics perspective as well, I think also what it's done is or seems to be doing now when you look at the stats, is closing that gender pay gap as well. Because all of a sudden now you get, you get primary caregivers or moms who might have given birth, who, all of a sudden say, look, I can actually continue working after, taking my mat leave. I don't have to choose between, is it family or is it going into the office? I can actually work from home, on 2 days of the week or, 1 day a week. It's really helped. And more to that, from a family dynamic perspective, it's meant that, fathers have also been able to comfortably take, mat leave, or even if they weren't provided, adequate mat leave. Certain countries, the mat leave policies actually varies in terms of duration, but it meant that as of dad, you can actually be at home supporting the family structure still. So there is the bad, but there's also a lot of good you can look at and cherry pick from COVID, which has changed the industry, not just law, but I think pretty much across the board.
I think, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, certainly you and I are in a fairly similar situation with young children and working spouses, and I think as much as everything for everybody across the world was a shock at that time, if you look now with a little bit of hindsight and a little bit of distance from that time, especially in the law, you've just touched on two things there: the family dynamic, which has changed, working hours, situations for many legal professionals, both male and female, and also the technology aspect. That's suddenly there were, every firm, regardless of size and regardless of country, had to look at how they were set up and what was their commitment to technology and giving the lawyers what they need, and then again we in addition to that, very quickly magnifying glass on the professionals that were working for you or with you or alongside you or wherever it may be, on do they need an office, or do they have the ability to work from the ironing board? We found out a lot about other people, and I for one have had to learn how to work at home, because I, up until that point, was very much I go to the work. I love being in an office, and that made me feel like I was at work. But you had to alter and change. But no, it's interesting what you say there. I think that COVID in many ways has. Again, with no disrespect to anybody who lost people during that time, it has changed business and family life in many ways very positively as well. That takes me on quite nicely to your thoughts around, well, first of all, sharing your journey and your clear determination. I hope the listeners can and the watchers on YouTube will be able to see that you are a determined professional, someone who's gone, these are what I want, this is what I kind of want, and you've made it work for you, and that is a really admirable trait, and it's something that I hope people can learn from you. So you've kind of you're an embodiment of something I said to a student once at UCT, UWC, University of the Western Cape. I did a big talk on careers for the law school, and one guy said to me, if I want to move abroad, how do I do it? And I was kind of stumped, because I just said, just do it. Just make it work and do what you need to do. And you had a very clear goal about traveling and experiencing overseas and working for the top firms. So it's very, very admirable to hear your journey on that front. So thank you for sharing that with us. In terms of the changes that you think are coming, and there's two questions kind of in one here, in the legal space. Your answers were very technology driven. What do you think is going to be? I mean, apart from the obvious word technology, what do you think what are you seeing at places like Norton Rose and these big international groups that give you a lot of excitement for the future of the law?
Yeah, so quite right, Rob. So technology is obviously there. It's going to impact the industry, or it has already done that, but what's pretty close to my heart, and what's pretty comforting and refreshing to see a lot of global firms doing now, is a lot of firms have targets on diversity now, which I think is, for me, is the next big shift in law. We now have, whether it's sexual preference, whether it's your gender, whether, it's race, a lot of firms have targets to try even out the playing field. And a lot of firms, talk of the 40-40, 20, quota that they're looking for, and not just at junior level, but also at the partnership level. So what that does when you bring more diversity into firms is you get more diverse thinking, different ways of thinking, which firms didn't used to do, 5-10 years ago, right? Which will then impact the way we service our clients, which will in turn also impact how our clients expect us, to service them or to provide them legal advice, the type of legal advice we do, and outside of even just corporate law, just from how are judges interpreting the law? We're getting more diverse benches across the board, in courts as well, right? Which means the thinking is different. The judgments, the way judgments are written, rulings are going to be different, which will truly impact, case law, which will truly impact then law in general, which I'm really excited about that change. I think it's a change that it's been a slow progress, but I think it's definitely ramping up now.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, those of the listeners who know me well will know that I've been involved in D&I projects since around about 2009, largely mainly based around gender issues within boards and that level of diversity. And it's I'm also now on a panel here where made up of some of the leading lawyers in South Africa, helping with recruitment structures for businesses and banks here in South Africa and law firms when it comes to neurodiversity, which is an area that is very close to my heart. My son has special needs, so it's something that I'm very personally tied to, and it's something that it's a wonderful area to help shape people's understanding of those with autism or ADHD or whatever on the spectrum they may be. So that's So I agree with you as someone who's also been lucky enough to travel the world and work in 50 plus cities. I think diversity is something that is something that for me, I know it sounds a silly thing to say, but it can stay. It's a thing that is a necessity. It gives different thinking. It gives different concepts. It gives different views. I mean, you obviously grew up in South Africa. Let's use that as an example. This is a country with 11 official languages, and every year I stay here, I'm 7 years in now, but every year I learn more about the language and its tying to the community or to the area, and how things are differently communicated, different thought patterns. I mean, this is a melting pot of wonderful diversity here.
Yeah.
And I think, the benefit to businesses is huge. Tied with the advancement of technology as well, then law's looking good. I mean, there's things are looking good.
No, I think it is. And everyone's worried, and you get a lot of articles written about, technology might take away jobs. I don't think it will. It will make jobs easier. It will make it more efficient. Which means maybe businesses become more profitable and they might actually grow, and you could be looking at a boom in terms of hiring of lawyers as well, actually. So it's definitely not there to take away jobs. I think it's just there to enhance the jobs we do already.
I couldn't agree more. I think, I work a lot with legal tech specialists here. I do a separate podcast each month about legal tech jobs throughout Africa. I recently interviewed someone else who's now in that space, working for one of the big five in their fusion department, which is fusing tech and the law. And as I said to her, I've been lucky enough to have 2 decades working in the legal job space, and what I've noticed that happens more than, and banking is probably the best example of this, certainly investment banking, is that jobs change all the time. It does, and what they have done is they businesses just keep expanding because jobs become more so my message to a lot of the lawyers that I work with of varying ages is embrace the technology. embrace it, and it, because it's what we're paying as a customer. What I'm paying you for is your interpretation and usage of that technology to make things either more efficient or better. It doesn't mean I'm going to drop you have to drop your fees. In fact, businesses may end up becoming a lot more profitable, and there may end up being more legal professionals out there, and certainly the stats that we're looking at show that. So yeah, I think law's in a good space. The more it embraces technology, or the right technology, anyway. But yeah, there's certain. I think you're right. There was certainly last year when there was a bit of a boom in AGI. I think there was a lot of worried faces of going, "Am I going to get replaced by a robot here?" But the example I often use, look, obviously my company's not specifically in the recruitment space. We are in executive search, and someone like yourself in Sydney and London experience will understand the difference. But in the recruitment space, the recruitment agency world, 2004, in 2004, the biggest thing that recruiters had across the world was their data, was their CVs, was their connections. And then 2005, LinkedIn hit the market and opened that whole world up. And the worry at that point in the industries, and at that point I had just left London, for agency world was that they're going to get replaced. There's not going to be any need. But what happens is the industry adapts, and now it's 50 times bigger than it ever was in terms of an industry, and it's $1 trillion industry. And the same will happen with law. So, just as we're coming to the end of this interview, and again, I thank you for taking us on your journey. What do you think, tying that in with what's happening with law? I've got two questions. Firstly, how did the London move come around, and how long will you be there? And then what do you see is going to be in your future, personal, professional, whatever you care to share? So firstly, London, how did you get that move? How did that come around?
Yeah. So again, being fortunate to work with a global firm, Norton Rose, who have big offices in London. It was an honest conversation, and again, you got to be for young lawyers listening on this on the podcast, you really have to be the driver of your own career. No one's going to drive your career for you. You can't be a passenger to your own career. So it's I took the driver's seat, and I had my career ambitions, and I wanted to have London as a tick on the CV. So I was just having honest conversations with the partners in Sydney and saying, look, here are my timelines. I do want to have some experience in London, some exposure in London. Can I make the move? And within 6 months, that was approved, and I was on the plane to London, and it's been a year, and it was initially a year, and again, taking the driver's seat, enjoying London at the moment is, again, having that honest conversation of, hey, look, it's been a year, I do want to give it another year. I do feel it would be beneficial to my own career, but also to the firm, right, to give or take relationship from law firm perspective, and again, they were happy with that, so it's another year in London. And the $1 million question, obviously, and I don't have a crystal ball for that, is what does the future hold? Very hard. I mean, right now, it's been 11, 12 years working here in private practice. It's obviously the $1 million question of, what next? Is it partnership? Is it, in-house role? I've got no idea at the moment. Right now, definitely running the race, and I see the prize as being partnership to, say you finished the race. And again, that's my personal, ambition there. So that's probably the kind of near-term goal. But more from a community building perspective, my aim, especially this year, is to try, see if I can get some engagement from sitting on a board of trustees, of charities, just trying to give back to the community. So that's definitely my aim this year, is to push for that, is to, alongside the law and what I've learned in the law, how do I implement that, from with charities, with schools, how do you give back to the community with your skill sets? So that's the goal.
Yeah, I know, it's lovely. It's like you say, it's the $1 million question, and the crystal ball isn't quite there. You never know, but someone as adventurous and as passionate as you will probably take your career into different directions, as and I'm sure it'll be a very well thought out, but also you'll be determined to get there. And look, I mean, you've got that tie back to DRC and South Africa as well, your former home, and these are countries at varying stages of their transition and growth, and I'm sure again, I would have to look at the stats. I'm not sure how many listeners we have in the DRC, but I'd have to look at the stats. But certainly in South Africa is the bulk of our listenership, and they'll be taking a lot of lessons from you and your drive and determination. And there's nothing to be shirked at. Look, obviously, I don't work alongside you. I don't know. I'm getting a picture of someone who's probably a very good lawyer and works very hard, and I like that. But what I'm trying to say is that you don't get to, and this is more of a message for maybe some of the younger lawyers maybe listening, is that you also don't get the chance to have those honest conversations with your bosses at Norton Rose unless you've got that good reputation internally, that network internally, that they can rely on you and go, yeah, Oliver's a good guy. Because if you're, I'm being a bit facetious here, but if one is in a firm and is a bit lazy and then turns around to their bosses and go, I want to move to New York, nah, maybe that's not on the cards, but you've obviously, what I'm trying to say is, what people can take away from it is that you've worked for that as well. You created your own luck, you've created your own opportunities, and that is a real good message for us to take away. But look, I'm going to let you get on with your day. I'm super jealous that you're in my hometown, although I was brought up a bit further south in Wimbledon. So,
okay, yeah.
But you're in a lovely part of the world, and I do love getting back. I was last back in December, and I was walking around with a smile on my face, all week. So look, Oliver, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. Honestly, you don't know how far-reaching these things are. You will be a real inspiration to many, many, many listeners at varying stages of their law career. I do a lot of work with students, obviously, but in our executive search team and research team, we only work with partners and managing partners and CEOs. And they often also turn around to me sometimes and say, how do I get abroad? What do I do? How do I get into an international firm? So everybody at varying stages of their career can take a lot from the journey that you're on. Thank you for sharing it with us. It's really, really good conversation. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Robert. I'll probably just leave lasting words for me is, to the listeners, is have fun with the career. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Along the way there will be bumps, there will be mistakes. Learn from those mistakes, but have fun with the journey. It's a really long journey, so take your time with it.
It's a brilliant message to end on, and thank you very much, Oliver. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.